The first thing my husband did after handing me the divorce papers was laugh. Not a nervous laugh. Not an awkward one. A real laugh. The kind that echoed across the courtroom hallway while people turned to look. "You should have seen your face," he said, shaking his head. "I almost feel bad. Almost." My fingers refused to move. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, as if every promise we'd made during 12 years of marriage had somehow been folded inside with those papers. I looked at him, searching for the man I'd fallen in love with. Instead, I saw someone I barely recognized. His expensive suit fit perfectly. His new watch gleamed under the courthouse lights. Behind him stood his attorney, wearing the confident smile of someone who already believed the case was over. They were certain I would sign. Certain I would walk away quietly. Certain I had no idea what they had planned. I lowered my eyes to the first page. Petition for dissolution of marriage. My name. His name. And a list of demands that left my stomach hollow. He wanted the house. The business I had helped build. Most of our savings. Even my grandmother's antique piano, the one I'd inherited years before I ever met him. I looked up, expecting someone to tell me there had been a mistake. Instead, my husband leaned closer. "Just sign it," he whispered. "You'll save yourself a lot of embarrassment." I almost believed him. Almost. Then the judge quietly flipped to the last page, paused, and frowned. He adjusted his glasses, read one paragraph again, and looked directly at my husband. The smile disappeared from my husband's face. And in that silent moment, I realized there was something hidden in those papers that neither of us had expected. People always assume a marriage falls apart because of one terrible day. In my experience, that's almost never true. It falls apart because of 1,000 ordinary days that slowly stop feeling ordinary. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 38 years old, and for the last 14 years, I worked as the operations manager for a small custom furniture company just outside Columbus, Ohio. On paper, the business belonged to my husband, Ryan. In reality, we built it together. When we first got married, Ryan had talent. He could take a rough piece of oak and turn it into something that looked like it belonged in a museum. But talent doesn't answer phones, balance invoices, negotiate with suppliers, or stay up until midnight fixing payroll mistakes. That part was me. I handled schedules, customer complaints, taxes, marketing, and every detail that kept the lights on. I never complained. Not because I enjoyed the stress, but because I believed we were building something for our future. For our family. We had one daughter, Lily, who had just turned 10. She had Ryan's dark hair and my habit of asking too many questions. Every Saturday morning, we'd make pancakes together while she told me about school, the book she was reading, or whatever new dream had captured her imagination that week. Those mornings felt untouchable. Like nothing bad could ever happen inside our little kitchen. Looking back now, I realize those moments became rarer long before I noticed. Ryan started working later. Or at least that's what he said. Business dinners became common. His phone never seemed to leave his hand, and if I walked into the room unexpectedly, the screen would suddenly go dark. I told myself not to overthink it. Marriage requires trust. At least, that's what everyone says. My mother used to tell me that love wasn't measured by grand gestures. It lives in the little things, she'd say. The cup of coffee someone remembers you like. The way they ask about your day. The way they make room for you, even when life gets busy. I thought about those words often. Mostly because the little things had started disappearing. Ryan stopped asking how my day had gone. He forgot birthdays he had never forgotten before. He missed Lily's piano recital because of an important client meeting. When we celebrated our 12th anniversary, he answered 2 phone calls during dinner. I smiled through it anyway. Because that's what I had become. Someone who smoothed over uncomfortable moments before anyone else noticed them. Friends called me patient. My coworkers called me dependable. Ryan called me the glue that holds everything together. At the time, I thought it was a compliment. Now I understand it was also an expectation. As long as I kept fixing every crack, he never had to admit the foundation was shifting beneath us. I kept believing we were going through a rough season. I kept believing the man I married was still there somewhere beneath the stress and long hours. I kept believing that if I loved him enough, worked hard enough, and stayed quiet long enough, we'd find our way back to each other. I had no idea that while I was fighting to save our marriage, Ryan had already started planning a future that didn't include me. And the first sign wasn't another late night at the office. It was something so small that I almost laughed when I noticed it. I wish I hadn't ignored it. The first thing I noticed wasn't another late night. It was the coffee. Ryan had always hated sugar. For 12 years, he'd taken his coffee exactly the same way, black, no exceptions. One Monday morning, I handed him his usual mug before work. He took one sip, frowned, and pushed it back toward me. "You forgot the sugar." I stared at him. "The sugar?" "Yeah." He sounded irritated, like I should have known. "You've been putting sugar in it for weeks." No, I hadn't. I didn't argue. I just made another cup. As he walked out the door, I looked at the untouched coffee sitting on the counter. Someone else had been making it for him. A few days later, Lily asked an innocent question during dinner. "Dad, are you coming to my science fair this Friday?" Ryan barely looked up from his phone. "I'll try." She smiled anyway. "You promised." I said I'll try. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. The room went quiet. Lily nodded and went back to her mashed potatoes without another word. That Friday, she stood beside her volcano project for nearly 2 hours, scanning every parent who walked through the school gym. Each time the door opened, her face lit up. Each time it wasn't Ryan, the light disappeared a little more. When the awards were announced, she won first place. She held the ribbon tightly as we walked to the car. Maybe Dad had something really important. She was trying to comfort herself. I hated that a 10-year-old already knew how. Ryan came home after 9. I completely forgot. That was all he said. No apology. No flowers. No attempt to make it right. The business started changing, too. For years, Ryan and I had shared access to every account. One afternoon, I tried logging into our bookkeeping software. Access denied. I refreshed the page. Same message.
Thinking it was a technical problem, I called Ryan.
Oh. His pause lasted just a second too long. I hired an accounting firm. You hired one? Yeah. Figured it'd take some pressure off you. He sounded almost cheerful. When were you going to tell me? I just did. Something about his tone made me feel like I was asking too many questions. As though I should be grateful. That night, I lay awake replaying the conversation. Not because of the bookkeeping. Because he had made a decision that affected both of us. Without even mentioning it. A week later, my friend Sarah stopped by the workshop. She'd known us since before we got married. As we stacked shipping boxes together, she hesitated. Can I ask you something? Of course. Who's the woman that's been having lunch with Ryan? I froze. What woman? Sarah looked genuinely confused. I've seen them together a few times downtown. She quickly added, maybe she's a client. Maybe. That word followed me home. Maybe. Maybe she was a client. Maybe Sarah misunderstood. Maybe I was imagining things. When Ryan walked through the front door that evening, I almost asked him. Instead, I heard Lily laughing in the living room. I couldn't bear the thought of starting an argument in front of her. So I swallowed the question. Looking back, silence became my biggest mistake. The next betrayal came wrapped in kindness. Ryan surprised me with a weekend spa gift certificate. I thought you deserved a break. It sounded thoughtful. Generous. I almost cried. Saturday morning, I packed an overnight bag and kissed Lily goodbye before leaving. The massage was wonderful. For the first time in months, I relaxed. Then, while eating lunch at the hotel cafe, I saw a social media post. One of Ryan's employees had uploaded pictures from a company barbecue. Everyone was there. Even Lily. Except me. The caption read, "Perfect weekend with the work family." Ryan had planned an entire company event. On the one weekend he'd made sure I was out of town. When I got home Sunday evening, Lily ran into my arms. You missed everything. She talked excitedly about games, music, and a magician. Then she stopped. I thought you didn't want to come. I looked at Ryan. He didn't meet my eyes. I never said that. Lily frowned. Dad told me you wanted a quiet weekend instead. I smiled for Lily's sake. But something inside me cracked. Not because I missed a barbecue. Because he had used our daughter to tell a lie. The final warning arrived in the mail. A credit card statement. One I didn't recognize. There were expensive restaurant charges. Luxury hotel reservations. Designer clothing stores. The balance was nearly $15,000. The account wasn't in my name. It was in Ryan's. But our home address was listed. When I asked him about it, he didn't even pretend to explain. It's business. $15,000? It's an investment. In what? He sighed dramatically. You always make everything into an interrogation. I stood there holding the statement while he walked upstairs. No explanation. No reassurance. Just irritation that I dared to ask. That night, after everyone was asleep, I opened my laptop. For the first time in our marriage, I started making copies. Bank statements. Tax returns. Business records. I wasn't looking for evidence of an affair. I was looking for answers. I didn't realize those documents would become the only reason I survived what happened next. Because 3 days later, Ryan announced that his parents were hosting a family dinner. He insisted everyone had to be there. He smiled the entire drive to their house. I wish I had understood why. Ryan's parents lived in a large brick house on the north side of town, the kind of place where every surface looked polished and expensive. His mother, Diane, greeted us at the door with air kisses and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Emily, you look tired," she said before I had even stepped inside. "Long week," I replied. She patted my arm as if I were a distant relative instead of her daughter-in-law of 12 years. The dining room was already set for 8 people. Ryan's father sat at the head of the table, Lily beside him, and 2 of Ryan's cousins chatted quietly near the window. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Dinner began with the usual small talk: weather, business, school. Lily excitedly told everyone about winning first place at the science fair. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I said. Ryan smiled at her. "I'm proud of you." The words sounded rehearsed. Halfway through the meal, Diane set down her wineglass and looked directly at me. "So, Emily, have you decided what you're going to do?" I blinked. "About what?" "The business, dear." The room fell silent. "What do you mean?" Diane exchanged a glance with Ryan. "Well, Ryan said you're planning to step away from the company." I assumed everyone had discussed it. My fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate. I turned to Ryan. "I never said I was leaving the company." He didn't look surprised. "I thought we talked about it." "No," I said carefully. "We didn't." His father cleared his throat. "Ryan mentioned you were feeling overwhelmed." "I've never said that either." Lily looked back and forth between us, confused. Ryan leaned back in his chair, suddenly impatient. "Emily, do we really need to do this here?" "Do what?" "Ask why you're telling people I've quit my job." "It's not a job," he said. "It's my company." The words hit harder than I expected. For 12 years, I had managed payroll, negotiated contracts, handled taxes, and kept that business running through every slow season and financial scare. And now, in front of his entire family, he was reducing me to an employee. Diane jumped in immediately. "Ryan has carried a tremendous burden. Perhaps it's time for him to focus on growth without so much interference." Interference. I stared at her, then at Ryan. He didn't defend me. He didn't correct her. He simply took another sip of wine. In that moment, I understood something I had been refusing to see for months. This wasn't stress. This wasn't a rough patch. This was a coordinated effort to push me out of the life I had helped build. Lily whispered, "Mom?" I forced myself to smile at her. "I'm okay, sweetheart." Then I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. I think Lily and I should go home. Ryan frowned. Don't be dramatic. I looked at him for a long second. For the first time in our marriage, I saw no confusion in his face, no guilt, no concern that he might be hurting me. Only annoyance that I wasn't cooperating. Come on, Lily, I said softly. As we walked toward the door, Diane called after me, Emily, running away won't solve anything. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. Without turning around, I said the words that changed everything. I'm not running away anymore. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do next. But as I buckled Lily into the car and drove away from that house, I made one decision with absolute certainty. I was done waiting for Ryan to tell me the truth. From that night forward, I was going to find it myself. The morning after the dinner at Ryan's parents' house, I did something I hadn't done in years. I stopped asking questions. Not because I had given up. Because I finally understood that every question I asked came with a carefully rehearsed answer. If I wanted the truth, I would have to find it without Ryan knowing I was looking. So I smiled. I packed Lily's lunch. I kissed Ryan goodbye before work. I acted exactly like the woman he thought he had under control. Inside, though, everything had changed. The first call I made wasn't to a friend. It wasn't to my family. It was to a lawyer. Her name was Rebecca Lawson, and she'd spent nearly 20 years handling family and business law. I almost canceled the appointment 3 times. Walking into her office felt like admitting my marriage was already over. She listened without interrupting while I explained everything: the business, the missing financial access, the unexplained credit card, the family dinner. When I finally stopped talking, she folded her hands. Emily, she said gently, I'm going to ask you one question. I nodded. Do you believe your husband has been completely honest with you? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. That silence answered for me. Rebecca slid a legal pad across the desk. From today forward, don't argue. Don't accuse. Don't confront him unless you absolutely have to. What should I do? Document everything. Everything? Every bank statement. Every email. Every text message. Every expense. Every change to the business. She paused. And don't tell him you're here. I promised I wouldn't. As I left her office, I realized something strange. For the first time in months, I didn't feel powerless. Over the next several weeks, I became an observer. Ryan thought I was distracted. In reality, I noticed everything. He started locking his home office. He changed passwords on accounts we'd shared for years. Packages began arriving while I was at work, but the shipping labels disappeared before I could read them. One afternoon I found a folder sitting beside the printer. It contained brochures for luxury condominiums downtown. I barely had time to read the cover before Ryan walked in. He calmly picked up the folder. Client project. Then he walked away. No explanation. No eye contact. Just another lie placed neatly on top of the others. Meanwhile, I quietly began preparing for a future I prayed I'd never need. I opened a checking account in my own name. Not to hide money. to protect the paycheck from my part-time consulting work. Rebecca had encouraged me to restart some of the freelance business management projects I'd once enjoyed before helping Ryan full-time. Within a month, I had 2 steady clients. By the second month, I had 4. It wasn't enough to replace everything. But it reminded me of something I'd forgotten. I was capable. I had built Ryan's business. Maybe I could build my own future too. One evening, Lily wandered into my office while I was organizing paperwork. "What are you doing?" "Cleaning old files." She smiled. "You always clean when you're thinking." I laughed softly. "Do I?" She nodded. "You cleaned the garage before Grandma's surgery." She counted on her fingers. "And before we moved." Another finger. "And before my first day of school." Children notice everything. Even the things adults think they're hiding. She climbed into my lap. "Are you and Dad okay?" The question stole the air from the room. I brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "We both love you very much." She looked at me for a long moment. That wasn't my question. My heart broke. I hugged her tightly. "No matter what happens," I whispered, "you'll always have me." She squeezed my hand. "I know." A few days later, Rebecca called. "I need you to come in." Her voice sounded different. Careful. When I arrived, several documents were spread across her conference table. Did Ryan recently create another company? I frowned. No. She turned one page toward me. Business registration records. There it was. A new furniture company. Registered 8 months earlier. The owner listed wasn't Ryan. It was his younger brother, Michael. But the business address was the same as ours. "What does this mean?" I asked. Rebecca looked me straight in the eye. It could mean nothing. She let the silence settle. Or it could mean assets are being moved. I stared at the paperwork. The dates lined up perfectly. 8 months earlier. That was when Ryan removed my access to the accounting software. The next breakthrough came by accident. Ryan left his phone charging in the kitchen while he took a shower. It buzzed. The screen lit up. I wasn't trying to snoop. I only glanced because I thought it might be Lily's school. Instead, I saw a calendar reminder. Meeting, H. Turner, 10 a.m. The name meant nothing. Until 2 days later. While sorting old invoices at work, I found the same name. Harold Turner. Corporate attorney. Not ours. Ryan's. I wrote the name down. Nothing more. Rebecca had warned me. Don't cross legal lines. Let facts come to you. So I waited. Then something happened that Ryan couldn't control. Our longtime office manager, Nancy, announced her retirement. On her final afternoon, she hugged me goodbye. "I've always admired you," she said. I smiled. "I'm going to miss you." She hesitated. Then lowered her voice. "Can I give you one piece of advice?" "Of course." "Don't sign anything, no matter how rushed they make it seem. I felt my pulse quicken. What do you mean? Nancy glanced toward Ryan's office before answering. I've worked here 26 years. Another pause.
I know when lawyers start showing up more than customers.
Before I could ask another question, Ryan walked into the hallway. Nancy simply smiled.
Take care of yourself, Emily.
Then she left. I never saw her again. But I never forgot what she said.
That evening, after Ryan fell asleep, I walked quietly into the garage. Hidden behind old holiday decorations was a small fireproof box where we kept important family documents. Birth certificates. Insurance papers. The deed to the house. I opened it. Everything looked normal. Until I noticed a folder I had never seen before. It was labeled simply Property Records. Inside were copies of the house deed, mortgage documents, insurance policies, and one folded page tucked into the back. It wasn't a property record at all. It was an unsigned draft of a post-nuptial agreement. My name appeared on every page. But I had never seen it before. According to the document, if our marriage ended, Ryan would retain nearly every major asset connected to the business because I had supposedly agreed that my contributions were voluntary spousal support rather than ownership or employment. There was only one problem. The signature line meant for me was blank. Someone had prepared the agreement. Someone had expected me to sign it. And judging by the date, they had been planning this for almost a year. I quietly folded the document, placed it back exactly where I found it, and locked the box. Then I stood alone in the dark garage, listening to my own heartbeat. For months, I had wondered whether I was imagining things. I wasn't. Ryan hadn't decided to leave me overnight. He had been building an exit strategy. Long before he ever handed me those divorce papers. A month later, I was officially served with divorce papers. Ryan didn't even try to hide his confidence. His attorney requested almost everything: the house, the business, most of our savings, and even claimed that I had never been an owner of the company. According to the documents, I had simply been helping my husband. 12 years of work had been reduced to a sentence. Rebecca didn't panic. She simply looked at me and said, "Now we respond." Over the next 2 weeks, we submitted payroll records, tax filings, emails, supplier contracts, and years of business correspondence. Every document told the same story. Ryan designed the furniture. I built the company. Then another surprise arrived. Nancy, the retired office manager, contacted Rebecca. She had found several archived payroll files and old partnership records while cleaning out boxes she'd taken home after retirement. One file contained handwritten notes from the accountant who helped us launch the business. They clearly described Ryan and me as equal partners, even though the ownership paperwork had never been formally updated after we married. It wasn't enough to end the case, but it completely changed the direction of it. Then Ryan made a mistake. During the financial disclosure process, he declared that his new company, registered under his brother Michael's name, had nothing to do with him. Rebecca requested bank records. The transfers told a different story. Money had quietly moved from our original business into the new company over several months. Not illegal by itself.
but it directly contradicted Ryan's sworn financial statement.
When his attorney saw the records, the confidence on his face disappeared. The biggest surprise came just days before our final hearing. Rebecca placed another document in front of me. It was the original operating agreement for the business. Buried near the end was a clause neither Ryan nor I had paid much attention to years earlier. It stated that if one spouse substantially managed the company's operations for more than 5 consecutive years, that contribution must be considered when dividing ownership during a dissolution.
I looked at Rebecca. Has this been here the whole time? She nodded. It was. So why didn't anyone mention it?
Because I don't think your husband expected anyone to read this closely. For the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself to breathe.
Ryan thought the paperwork guaranteed his victory. Instead,
the paperwork was about to become the reason everything changed. And neither of us knew what the judge was going to say when that hidden clause was finally read aloud. The courtroom was quieter than I expected.
There were no dramatic outbursts. No raised voices. Just the soft shuffle of papers and the steady hum of the air conditioner. Ryan sat across from me in the same tailored suit he'd worn the day he handed me the divorce papers. He looked relaxed, occasionally whispering something to his attorney. He never looked in my direction. Rebecca gently nudged my arm. Just answer what's asked. I nodded. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. I was simply tired. The judge reviewed the financial records one document at a time. Business tax returns, bank statements, payroll reports, emails, the transfers into the new company. Every piece fit into a larger picture. Ryan's attorney argued that the business had always belonged solely to Ryan and that my work was nothing more than the support one spouse naturally gives another. Rebecca stood. She didn't speak for long. She simply walked to the clerk, handed over one final binder, and returned to her seat. Your Honor, she said, we ask the court to consider the company's original operating agreement alongside the evidence already submitted. The judge opened the binder. He turned several pages without saying a word. Then he stopped. The room became so quiet that I could hear someone typing in the back of the courtroom. He adjusted his glasses and read the paragraph again. Then he looked directly at Ryan. Mr. Carter, he said evenly, were you aware of this provision? Ryan frowned. What provision? The management contribution clause. His attorney leaned over, quickly flipping through his own copy of the agreement. The color drained from his face. He whispered something to Ryan. Ryan grabbed the document himself, scanning the page. His confident smile disappeared. For the first time since all of this began, he looked uncertain. The judge continued. This agreement recognizes long-term operational management as a substantial ownership contribution. Combined with the financial records, payroll history, and testimony provided, the court cannot ignore Mrs. Carter's role in creating and maintaining this business. Ryan finally spoke. Your Honor, that's not what we intended when we signed those papers. The judge folded his hands. What you intended years ago is less important than what the agreement actually says. Silence filled the courtroom. Ryan looked toward me for the first time that day. There was no anger in his eyes. Only disbelief. As if he couldn't understand how his carefully planned future had unraveled. The judge continued reviewing the remaining evidence. He noted the transfers into the second company. He questioned why they had not been fully disclosed. Although he made no accusation of fraud, he stated clearly that the incomplete financial disclosure affected the court's confidence in Ryan's claims. When the ruling was delivered, it wasn't dramatic. It was fair. The house would be sold, with the proceeds divided equitably. The business would be independently valued, and I would receive my legal share based on my documented contributions. Our retirement savings would be split according to state law. Most importantly, Lily's well-being would remain the priority, with shared parenting responsibilities structured around her needs, not either parent's pride. Ryan lowered his head. His attorney quietly closed the file. As everyone began gathering their papers, Ryan walked toward me. "Emily." His voice was softer than I'd heard in years. "I never thought it would end like this." I met his eyes. Neither did I. He hesitated. "I wasn't trying to erase everything you did." I let the silence answer before speaking. "You already did." There was nothing cruel in my voice. Just the truth. Rebecca touched my shoulder. "We're finished." As I walked toward the courtroom doors, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I had one, but because I no longer needed Ryan to admit what I'd always known. The truth had finally spoken for itself. Outside the courthouse, Lily ran toward me from the bench where my sister had been waiting with her. She wrapped her arms around my waist. "Is it over?" I smiled through tears that finally felt like relief. "Yes," I whispered. "It's finally over." People often ask me if I regret staying as long as I did. For a long time, I didn't know how to answer. Some days I wished I had walked away sooner. Other days, I remembered the life we once shared and wondered where it had gone. But regret has a way of keeping you trapped in a past you can no longer change. So I chose something else. I chose peace. A year has passed since the divorce was finalized. The house was sold, just as the court ordered. Lily and I moved into a smaller place only 15 minutes from her school. It wasn't grand, but every room felt honest. There were no arguments hiding behind closed doors. No awkward silences at the dinner table. Just laughter slowly finding its way back into our lives. The settlement I received gave me the chance to do something I never imagined. I opened my own business consulting firm, helping small family-owned companies organize their operations and grow sustainably. The first time I unlocked the office door, I stood there for a moment, smiling. Not because it was perfect. Because it was mine. Word spread quickly. Many of my clients came through referrals, saying someone they trusted had recommended me. With every new project, my confidence grew a little stronger. I wasn't rebuilding the life I'd lost. I was creating one I had never believed I deserved. Ryan and I still see each other when we exchange Lily. Our conversations are polite, brief, and focused on her. The anger that once lived inside me has faded. Not because I forgot what happened. Because carrying it became too heavy. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't pretending someone didn't hurt you. It's refusing to let that hurt control the rest of your life.
One Saturday morning, Lily and I were making pancakes together.
She looked at me and smiled. You laugh more now. I stopped stirring the batter. I do. She nodded. A lot more. Children notice everything.
This time, her observation made me smile. As she carried 2 plates to the table, sunlight poured through the kitchen window, warming the room in a way that reminded me of the mornings we'd once shared years ago. Only this time, there was no fear about what the day might bring.
Just hope. Looking back, I realized the divorce papers weren't the end of my story.
They were the beginning of a life built on truth instead of appearances.
And if there's one lesson I hope someone listening takes with them, it's this. Never measure your worth by the person who failed to see it. Because the moment you choose to see it for yourself, no one can ever take it away again.